Greetings, fellow nationalists. I'm Michael Quinn, founder of the Irish Nationalist Brotherhood. Today's topic is the myth of white privilege by WN14. Something must be wrong. My finances are in shambles. Mainstream newspapers won't publish my pieces. And no matter how much I try to convince Fox News that they need male eye candy as well, they just won't give me a show. Then I gaze into the mirror at my alabaster complexion and say, what's wrong with this picture? I'll have to address this at the next white people's meeting. Of course, it isn't really true that all we Caucasians get together in a big conference hall somewhere and rubbing our hands together with devilish glee conspire as to how we are gonna get ourselves some of that there white privilege. Yet you wouldn't know it listening to egghead academics, media mouths and on-civil rights agitators. Put white privilege into a search engine and no small number of results will be for education URLs, which means that our mental institutions of higher learning are busy teaching, quote, critical race theory, unquote, and ideas such as, quote, whites are taught not to recognize white privilege, unquote, and that, as this University of Dayton site informs, white persons have a special freedom or immunity from some liabilities or burdens to which non-white persons are subject. There is also something called the White Privilege Conference and a website devoted to it. I actually had to log on to make sure it wasn't a spoof site, but truth is stranger and stupider than fiction. And American thinker recently wrote about an event called Erasing White Privilege, during which whites sat around in a room confessing their collective oppressor sins while people of colour discharged rage, yelling at them and preaching, "Ain't Obama's post-racial America grand?" Of course, I don't imagine there are many plumbers, supermarket workers or forklift operators at such meetings, and not just because they actually have to work, it's also because they know something. White privilege is a myth. Let's look at the facts. Because of the fashionable discrimination known as affirmative action, whites, males especially, are often untouchables in the job market. And examples are legion. Jewish talk show host Michael Savage has often mentioned that after he earned his PhD, he had trouble finding a job in his chosen field and was told in so many words that white men need not apply. I could also mention a junior high school friend of mine whose test score was too low to qualify for the specialty high school I attended, and a black student who gained admission with the exact same score. Or read this essay by Professor L. Pogeman, who cites the case of a brilliant PhD philosopher who was denied a tenure-track position because the university in question had to hire a, quote, woman or a black, unquote. Then there is Dayton, Ohio Police Department, which recently discarded its recruit exam and the scores of 748 people who passed it because not doing so would have resulted in too many whites being hired. And there is social discrimination as well. While black comedians can use derogatory terms for whites such as cracker, white comedians who use corresponding anti-black racial epithets risk career destruction. A racial slur isn't even necessary for a white person to incur the thought police's wrath. Sportcaster Jimmy the Greek Snyder lost his job in the 1980s for, while tipsy at a restaurant, offering a non-sophisticatedly stated opinion as to why blacks are great athletes. Even more ridiculous, Washington D.C. mayoral staffer David Howard was pillared and had to resign his position. However, he was later rehired for using the word niggardly, which is of Scandinavian origin and means cheap, during a staff meeting. Golf commentator Kelly Tilghman was suspended for 2 weeks for innocently using the term lynch when describing what young players might have to do to beat Tiger Woods. And university student Keith John Sampson was charged with racial harassment for reading a book about the Ku Klux Klan in the presence of black colleagues. It didn't matter that it was an anti-KK book. There is also a trove of government programs designed to aid minorities, such as those geared toward minority-owned businesses, but no corresponding help for whites. And as whistleblowers recently revealed, our Department of Justice has long been ignoring voting rights cases when the victims have been white. This is where the white privilege propagandists might say, but wait, whites are wealthier than other racial groups and occupy more positions of power and prestige. Why do you think that is? This is the same reasoning leftists use when claiming that the large number of blacks in prison proves discrimination in the criminal justice system. But let's see how valid this circumstantial argument really is. The median income of Jewish Americans is approximately twice that of their non-Jewish countrymen. Additionally, while only about 40% of high school graduates attend college, the rate among Jews is 85%. Jews also occupy positions of power at a rate greatly in excess of their 2% of the population. Yet, should we speak of Jewish privilege? It would be more instructive to note a secret of Jewish people's success. They place great emphasis on education and workplace achievement. And what about blacks' dominance in mainstream sports? Wouldn't it be ridiculous to talk about black athletic privilege? Group-specific successes isn't just an American phenomenon either. As Professor Walter Williams wrote, during the 1960s, the Chinese minority in Malaysia received more university degrees than the Malay majority, including 400 engineers degrees, compared with 4 for the Malays, even though Malays dominate the country politically. In Brazil's state of Sao Paulo, more than 2/3 of the potatoes and 90% of the tomatoes produced were produced by people of Japanese ancestry. So while we could prattle on about Chinese privilege in Malaysia or those privileged Japanese boys from Brazil, it would be wiser to accept the simple truth. There is simply no evidence that all groups can succeed equally in every endeavour. And this brings us to the real prejudice at work here. Whether it's Jewish Nobel Prize winners, blacks in the athletic arena, or something else, we generally give credit where it is due, except when the relatively successful group is white people. Then they are guilty of discrimination, oppression and victimization, and will never be proven innocent. Their success just must have come at the expense of others, no matter what the facts say. As for oppression, what is the end game here? Many foreign nations have enacted hate speech laws predicated on the idea that expressing negative sentiments, true or not, about a group can ultimately lead to its persecution. Well, another privilege whites don't have is dispensation from the laws of man's nature, and when they are constantly and unfairly maligned as deserving not their successes but only contempt for being the source of the world's woes, it's not hard to figure out what the consequences will be. That's it for this evening's folks. Until next time, Boo and a boss. Slán.